So I'm delighted today to have on the podcast Lizzie Edwards, a fellow personal stylist. But in fact, Lizzie is the OG personal stylist back in the day when in London, I think there were only about three people doing what we do now. I think it was, over 15 years ago that you started, Lizzie.
Yeah.
And she also used to mentor me as well back in the day. And I'm just so excited to have her on today to be talking about workwear. Welcome, Lizzie, onto the Style Stories podcast.
Oh, it's so nice to be doing this with you, Lisa. Thank you so much for asking me. It's just going to be really fun talking to you.
Yes. So I always say it's better if the guest introduces themselves because otherwise I get all tongue tied and I get it all wrong. But would you mind giving us a quick bit of a potted history about your background, where you started? Like I said, you were the OG back in the
Oh,
day.
that's so funny. That's so sweet. Thank you. You know what? You're right, though, in a way. I definitely wasn't the OG, but when I started, when I first got my website up on Google, there was two others that I remember at the time. So I've been a personal stylist now since 2005, so just over 18 years, which just kind of freaks me out a little bit. How long have you been doing it? I can't remember.
Nearly 15 years.
So there you go. So
Uh,
18 years ago, I started my business as a personal stylist, and when I first started, I started off, like you're saying, there wasn't really anyone else really doing it. So when I decided I wanted to get training in it, I went to America to train because everything in the UK was about image consulting, and it was very sort of corporate, and that just wasn't my background at all. So my background is that I was coming more from a fashion. I mean, it's kind of weird, really, because it's kind of literally gone the whole other way. But I started off, I did fashion at college after I left school. I went to fashion college after art college. And then I worked as a model in the 90s. And then I completely went off in a different direction, went back to university and did what I would call a normal degree. And then I started working as the first proper jobs when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, because I went to university, can you believe it, as a mature student when I was like 27, which seems crazy now. Now I'm in my 50s, but that
sure.
was mature. So then when I was in my early 30s, I just thought, I don't know what I want to do. So I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with that. Like I just did not know what I wanted to do. So I worked with a career coach, and the thing that came out of it when I looked at all of the things I was interested in was to become like a personal shopper. So I started off doing that with the help of the career coach. And I really have to say, I am a massive advocate for coaching. I think I would not have my business without it. Because I had someone to help me just think it was possible. So a lot of the time when you can't look around you and see what's there, I was like, right, she just would ask me to do things, like she challenged me, right, go and get 5 clients. Which I wouldn't have sat at home and decided I'm going to go and get 5 clients, but she sort of pushed me to do that. So I got my clients, and I thought, wow, this is definitely what I wanted to do. Because I'd also, in the interim times, I'd struggled with an eating disorder, I'd had depression, all sorts of things where clothes had become something where I'd really seen myself slide into, put on loads of weight. Like people always find that quite shocking, but yeah, I was like a size 16, which I know isn't big by lots of people's standards, but it wasn't me. Like it just wasn't my body. I got to that size from massively binging. So I'd been through all these struggles, and I'd seen myself really slide into like jogging bottoms basically. And when I kind of came out of that, I really had, as I said, I'd done a lot of work on myself. I'd been in groups, I'd done therapy, all these things. And I really saw for myself the difference it made. One day I made a decision to go and buy a pair of what I call proper trousers. So I can picture myself now. I went to Marble Arch, Marks and Spencer's. I bought a pair of black trousers with a waistband and a button, and they were a size 16. And I was like, right, this is, and I felt different. So that was a real kind of, I'm going to say, well, it was a turning point for me, because it was a turning point for me psychologically to see, right, no, I'm going to make an effort for myself. I've got to sort of start caring for myself. But I'd always had an interest in clothes. I'd always, from studying fashion, from being a model, but I was never interested in being a fashion stylist because I wasn't really into fashion. I just liked nice things. And also the other thing that I'd realised that I was really good at, I was really good at shopping, and I loved browsing. Like I love walking around the stores and just finding something really great, even if I don't buy it. I don't know if you can relate to that, but when you're
Yeah.
going around, you're thinking, oh my God, this is amazing.
But
So
that's a
even
lot
if
of
it's,
people's idea of hell.
Yeah, but I used to love it. And I tell you what, it's really interesting. Again, in times when I've done reflection on things, with that whole idea of 10,000 hours to make you an expert. When I was a model, it sounds weird to think that back in the day, no phones, right? So you'd leave your house in the morning, you'd have a list of what they would call go-sees or appointments. And I'd come from my house into central London. I'd have to go to meet magazine editors or photographers. And I might have an appointment at 10 in the morning. Say there used to be a magazine house just off Carnaby Street. And I'd go there, say at 10, and then I might not have an appointment till 3 in the afternoon, and I wouldn't go back to my flat. So I'd find myself knocking around all day. And again, you couldn't ring a friend or arrange to meet somebody because you'd left the house. Again, it sounds really weird to people who are younger now. That was the idea. So I'd end up killing time basically walking around stores in Oxford Street, and I'd just be wandering. So I just got good at wandering and spotting things. And I didn't really buy a lot of stuff. I didn't have a lot of money, to be honest, but I really, I used to enjoy just browsing and looking and shopping. So that kind of, I've gone off on a big tangent here, but that kind of got my love of all of those things, and then my real interest in personal development from my own issues. They kind of all just came together. So when I was working with this career coach, and she sort of was floating ideas, and we were brainstorming ideas, that just felt like a good fit. And after she'd made me get these guinea pig clients, it was like a real moment. I just felt so right. I just thought, this is just so right for me. Like, I really wanted to help people. I could see the result that they got in the dressing room. Again, I know that you'll experience this when you're with a client in a dressing room and they see themselves differently in front of the mirror. It's just nothing like it. It's just an absolutely joyful feeling. And to know that something that I find fun and I can do really easily, really effortlessly, that other people hate and people struggle with, was just like an absolute perfect point, really. So that's kind of how I started. And then I got going, and then I was like, right, I really want to, if I'm going to do this, I'm very much like, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it properly. So I looked for training. Everything in the UK was very much image consultancy, and that just didn't feel right for me. So I went to America. I trained with an amazing woman called Carla Mathis, and I also did some work with an amazing woman who unfortunately is no longer with us, called Brenda Kinsell. And I started my personal styling business, having learned all about colour and style. And the irony now is that I've kind of moved. Everyone's a personal stylist now. That's the main courses now, that when people can train, it's all about personal styling. But actually my niche, the people I work with, is much more, I've kind of gone back into the realm of where the image consulting would have sat before. I talk to women about workwear. But again, a lot of people assume when you say the word workwear that it's corporate. Well, a handful of my clients are corporate, but a lot of my clients aren't corporate. Workwear can mean jeans and trainers. My client last week is a director, so she's very much, big puffer jackets, jeans, trainers, but it's still something that she needs to shop for. She needs to shop for her workwear. She needs to shop for that environment. So for me, it's very much about practical lifestyle clothes, not about fashion. So that's kind of my journey. But it's interesting now, because all those kind of image consulting training courses, they don't even exist anymore. So it's, as you say, 18 years. It's a long time.
It's a long time. And just quickly, before I sort of go into what you do now with your business, when you talked about your issues, you called them, and what got you to the point where you realized that clothes have some sort of power. Really, I'm the same. Our stories are really similar. I'm normally a size 10, 8 to 10. It's my fighting weight naturally, and I was size 14, and I had depression when I was 22. It's interesting. It's like,
Wow, I did not know
yeah.
that.
And so
Mm.
when you tell me about that, it just takes me back to that. And I
Mm.
actually have used clothes throughout my life as a form of armor, as a way to get me places. Like, I used clothes when I worked at Coutts Bank, when I was paranoid about my Essex accent and everyone else was posh, double barreled with signet rings in Coutts Bank. And I was this Essex girl, and I just felt, just out of sorts, and just like I stood out and didn't fit in. And I really paid attention to what I wore, and I kind of sort of power dressed in a way. And
Mm.
that's when I realised that you can use clothes as a tool to get you
Mm. You
somewhere.
had that experience for yourself. And
And I've
just,
actually
again, it's an interesting thing, because people often say to me, because outside of those periods where I had an eating disorder and I put on weight, I say, because people often, if I say to people that I had an eating disorder, they assume it was anorexia, and it wasn't. It was the opposite end of the scale. But that being really big when it's just not who you are on the outside. It's interesting because I've had clients up to a size sort of 24. I've had clients who are really big, and it's who they are. And they're, a lot of them actually, I work with very successful women, they're confident. They've got nothing on it. And I've had clients who are a size 6 and looking in the mirror and saying, oh, I look fat. Like, size is only, it's in your head a lot of the time, isn't it? But it's how you feel. And I knew that the size I was as a result of me abusing myself. It wasn't a natural way. And when I got over my eating disorder, which actually, the interesting thing was, when I started working with my career coach, I was still really struggling. And at one point I said to her, I think I should wait until I've dealt with this problem, until then I can focus on starting this business coaching, this career coaching. And she said, no, I think this is what will help you get over it. And it was. Interestingly enough, I'll be completely honest, I think I swapped my food addiction for workaholism, because I then ended up being all I did was work. I was single. I was passionate about what I was doing. So I just worked day and night, and I got really into it. But, I steadied out, and, and touch wood, food has never been an issue for me again. I would never say never, because it's an insidious, horrible issue to have. And I'm grateful every day that I don't have issues around food at all. And my weight has been pretty much the same ever since, but I know from when I'm with clients as well, a lot of my clients, especially now, I work with a lot with menopausal women. That's probably the majority of my clients are over 40, if not over 50, like myself. And it's hard for people when they gain weight and and who they are in the mirror is not how they see themselves. It's very difficult. And at least, even though I know people look at me and go, oh, it's all right for you, I have been there. I have been there. I do understand the pain of it. I really do. And it's finding that sweet spot between where you're, and it's something that I talk about a lot with my work, is that obviously a lot of women have hung up on this idea of body shape and dressing for your body shape. It's not something that I prioritize at all with my work. I'm very much about, you find your style aesthetic first. That's the kind of starting point. And then you work around that first. Dressing to look slim is never the first goal,
Yeah.
in my book.
Aesthetic is your style, personality is absolutely so important. But you've also, you did move into a niche. You work with women who are leaders and sort of senior professionals, very much professional women who have their own money and big jobs and all of that. And you've now created a membership specifically to help. So this is sort of another stage of your business, isn't it, that's gone on?
Yeah. So over the years when I was working, it's one of those things that as the years went on, I was getting fully booked. So my rates went up. And then in the end, I was priced myself out of the market for a lot of people. So then increasingly the women I was working with were very successful, senior executives and business owners and things like that. So that's kind of my niche sort of found me. When people, often if they're willing to invest money in themselves and in clothes, when they can see a real ROI on it, like I want a promotion, I've had a promotion, those kind of things, it makes it easier for them to invest in themselves. So that kind of happened. And then, so what happened for me, I wrote a book in 2018. Well, actually it started it in 2016, published in 2018, called Look Like the Leader You Are. And it's fact, when I started that book, actually, the first draft, it was men and women. So I did work with men. I still occasionally work with men, but because they're always the husbands of my female clients, I don't market to them and I don't talk about it publicly, but I do sometimes do men. But that kind of book, it started off like that. And then gradually, like anything that we're told as business owners, is that you speak to a problem and you speak to a specific person. So the book became much more around dressing for work. And so that book, Look Like the Leader You Are, 2018, that came out. And then obviously my plan always was, when I wrote it, it was almost, that the book could be anything from a half an hour talk to a 8-week course, and anything in between. And my plan was always to make a digital course out of it. But obviously very busy with my business, because back before the pandemic, my business, I had 3 other stylists working in my team, and then the pandemic struck, and obviously we all know what happened. We all shut down, and as one-to-one stylists, both you and I, that's not possible for pretty much that whole of 2020. So rather than twiddle my thumbs, I launched my membership, which is Elevate, which is for women. And again, what's interesting, and often when I open the doors, because it's not always open, I open the doors every kind of quarter, every 6 months, people do say, "Oh, I don't know if it's for me because all your clients are like super like high achievers." And actually, the reason I started Elevate is, yes, the women I work who are in Elevate, they are successful. But one of the things I wanted to be able to do was work with loads more people than I can one to one. So the difference between my one to one rates and being in Elevate is huge. So anyone who wants to invest in their workwear, or dressing for work, and a lot of it's a mindset issue, and you'll know this with clients. It's not necessarily about the specifics of it. I've got clients in Elevate who are in all different industries, because what I teach is people take it on to mean what it means for them. It's very open to what that means, and it's also different countries. I've got clients in Elevate from Australia to America to a lot around Europe, and it's not even about the specific things I recommend. Not everybody's wearing the same trousers, not everybody's wearing the same shoes, because some people work in a very corporate environment and some people are sitting at Zoom on their own at home every day. So it's really broadened it out to be able to make what I teach accessible to more people, because that's what I'm really passionate about, helping women to feel good and to look good, but also just to have a simpler life. I see, particularly with my friends, I personally don't have children, and so I already know that I've got a lot more time than a lot of women, but I see a lot of women juggling work, family. Middle-aged women have also often got the responsibility of caring for elderly parents. They've got children, and just because their children have left, grown up and they're not toddlers anymore, doesn't mean, in fact, if anything, I think they look like they need more time, more time for them. So a lot of women they're trying to dress for work, and they're senior in their career, and they've often got an outward facing role, which is often, again, the thing that I've realized with working for my clients is there's a point when in a woman's career where, when they've been promoted, this is if they're employed, if they've been promoted internally, people know how great they are. So their image is often, even if it's not great, they get away with it. But the minute they get promoted to a role where suddenly they're outward facing and they have much more attention on them from outside, there's a lot more judgment coming in, and a lot more kind of questioning about people's suitability for the role or their success and things like that. So all of that, for me, one of the things I'm really clear on in my message is about simplifying, making life much simpler, streamlining your wardrobe, having good quality, having a very clear signature style, being conscious with your shopping, forgetting about the fads and the trends and being influenced by someone on Instagram and newsletters that hit your inbox. Just taking all of that off your plate and being very focused on what is right for you. And it's just a huge stress relief. I don't know how, I know you love clothes, Lisa, so I know that you're probably, and even me, I don't find it difficult, but I'm sure that even amongst your friendship group, you've got those friends where it's just hard. It's hard for them.
Yeah, the amount of times people say, "I just don't know what goes with what. I don't know what to buy." I mean, there's also that the capsule wardrobe guides that are around that sort of say, if you get these 5 things, all of your problems are solved. Well, let's just, I go on about this on this podcast.
Yeah, I don't want a biker jacket. Whatever, when they tell you what you need.
That don't work for you, that don't work for me. And like you said, the women in your group from all around the world, in different types of industries, they have different jobs. Some are working at home, some are hybrid working, some are in offices, corporate, whatever. But at the end of the day, on a basic level, I think all the issues are the same.
They're all the same. They want to feel good and they want to look good, and they've lost their way. And the biggest issue, I think, again, a lot of this I really kind of unpicked when I wrote my book. It was me trying to work out from working with one-to-one clients, where it's so instinctive for me. I had trained, but I'm not a theory person, but really unpicking, like, what is the issue here? And a lot of it's, time poor. That's one of the really big issues. But one of the biggest issues I feel is just the overwhelm. There's so much choice, and I feel it. Like, I walk into the stores and I am at home in the stores. I know where things are. I know what I'm looking for. I know what the different brands, just from being around them. And I find it overwhelming. I can walk into a store and just, when I go to do my prep for a client, and I literally just have to stop and take a breath for a minute and be like, right, what am I looking for? Okay, navy trousers, or, like, whatever. And that's the way I teach people to shop, like being really specific and just taking a breath. Because I don't know if you've ever done this. I've been in John Lewis once. Oh, sorry, I think it's falling off.
This camera keeps falling off.
Sorry.
It's
It's
fine.
stuck on my screen because I've got a desktop screen. I walked into John Lewis once in the summer and I saw all these women, mainly sort of middle-aged women, wandering around. And it was the season where people were probably buying things for weddings and, you know, events and things like that. And I just was watching people going into the dressing room and seeing these women and then the thing they're holding and just thinking, what are you thinking that is going to be right for you? Like, so wrong. And it sort of hurts me to see people. If I could stand there all day just saying to people, hey, you know, hang on a minute, wait there, I'm just going to go and grab you something else, just even without knowing them, even without them going through all the exercises that I get people to go through about, you know, all the things about finding their style words and finding their personal brand words, I can still look at something and think, that's just not going to, this doesn't suit you.
And the thing is as well is, you know, looking on Instagram and looking at influencers and getting ideas from that. If you're not actually clear in the first place on what is for you, you're not going to be able to work out what isn't for you, and then the whole thing becomes more overwhelming. So it's so worth doing some work on it. I mean, we're doing this podcast in two bits. So today we're talking about, like, we're going to talk a bit now about workwear and why it's important to look good at work, because a lot of people would argue, plenty of people would argue, it isn't important, because if I do my job well, then that should be enough. If I'm good at my job, you know, if I'm a great trader or broker or, you know, whatever it is, a great lawyer, etc., then I should be able to wear what I want. And I think that the younger generation feel that quite a lot.
Mm,
But I just want to talk today about why it matters. The workwear lines are blurred, so people are more confused than ever, I think, since the pandemic. They're like, what do I wear to work now? Is it all right? Can I wear jogging bottoms? Is that fine? I don't know. You know, I think a lot of people are confused.
mm,
So, you know, we can't sort of say on this podcast, get this, and this, because it's
mm.
different for everyone. But there are some things you can do to just elevate. And, you know, why is this important?
Yeah, I think the thing is, it just really is important. And for anyone, I don't think there's many people left who would argue that it doesn't matter. I mean, there's always a few, but really, I think that's a whole different issue. Most people agree that it matters. Now, it matters from the perspective of first impressions of how other people see you, ongoing impressions, how your colleagues see you. You know, we can see how somebody, this is all instinctive as well. We're not making judgments logically. These are just things that we feel in our core when we meet somebody. If somebody's really scruffy and looks like they really don't give a shit, we judge them in that way, even if they're a really good friend. You know, like it's like an instinctive feeling that it just looks like they don't have a huge amount of self-care. It's also often a lack of respect to your audience, and often this will depend on the dress code of the company. And obviously the industries that you just mentioned are very, you know, often quite sort of traditional corporate. Not always, because I mean, I've got a lot of lawyer clients. I've got a lot of lawyers in Elevate, and, you know, they're not all suited and booted. I mean, it depends what kind of firm you're in. It depends the kind of audience you're in. But I really think that the idea of it does just matter for your audience. And the thing that I always say is, look, if all things being equal on talent and skill, and then somebody was presented with two options of who do you want to book, who do you want to hire, who do you want to take to a meeting with you, the person who's shown up looking sharp or looking appropriate is going to get the gig. So for me, it's a tool. It's not saying that you don't need to have all the other stuff. And again, given the age group of the women that I work with, mostly senior, they've been working a long time, it's a given that they're good at their job. They wouldn't be there. They would have been found out long ago. It's the X factor, it's the extra point. But the other thing that I think is such a huge part of the whole thing about clothes is how it makes you feel as a person. You know, when you walk out the door, going back to my black trousers, you know, or my jogging bottoms when I was not in a good place, how we feel when we get dressed. You know, and I've been there this week. I've had a bit of a hard week, if I'm honest. My mother died this year. I've been clearing out her house. I was at her house really in jogging bottoms and things like that. And before I came home, you know, a couple of days ago, I was thinking, oh God, I really feel a bit crappy. And I realised when I got home the next morning, the first thing I had to do was I got up, I washed my hair, I made sure that I put on clothes with kind of proper clothes, you know, trousers with a waistband. I put a shirt on rather than a hoodie. I knew that that helped me get into a different state. Like it just does. And it doesn't mean that those clothes weren't super comfortable, because the trousers I wear are quite wide leg, pleated front, loose. You know, it doesn't mean that I'm wearing uptight clothing, but it sends a signal to myself, I've got dressed today. I'm making an effort today. So I think that a lot of that with work, which is why all of the blurred lines with working from home, it still matters. Even if you're sitting with trousers on that have got an elasticated waist, or a shirt that's got a bit of stretch in it, that's different to what you'd wear into an office, it psychologically makes you feel much different. And also, how other people see you, they treat you differently. And I know this, and you'll know this from your clients. I mean, I know that I've had clients where I've gone shopping with them because they've had a new job or something. And again, one of my clients, Sarah, I remember she was just emailing me the week after. She said, I can't believe how differently people are to me than they were in my last job. Like, they really see me differently. And she's kind of like, it's just because I've got some different clothes on. But it's just interesting. And again, I think anyone who's had that experience where they have made an effort, whether it's even on their wedding day, when they look differently, they felt different, where they've, again, a lot of women, it's when they've been to the hairdresser and they've had a blow dry, or when they've had their nails done. I know for myself, when I've painted my nails, it's these really small things. It doesn't have to be huge things. I look down at my keyboard and my nails are painted. I feel different. You just feel different. It's like a self-care thing. If you feel like you self-care, and people notice that. So this isn't even about, obviously, the makeover shows that we used to have with Trini and Susanna and things. The person that they used as an example was so far on the other end of the scale that they were almost like, they looked like they'd just, slept in their clothes, or they'd pulled them out and they had moth holes in it. There's that extreme. And then there's just sort of normal everyday people, like just not making that much of an effort, not much thought. And then there's the actual looking put together. And we all know those people. And every client I've ever had, when I've said, oh, is there anyone that style you admire? A lot of the time, again, it's not about a celebrity. They'll be saying, oh, there's this lady or my boss or somebody in the office who just always looks amazing. They will have put effort into that. It doesn't happen by accident. It takes time and effort to make that look put together, but it pays dividends, because when you've got that, you just have another level of confidence and you work differently.
I tell you what, those makeover shows would not stand up today, would they? The way they used to speak to people, they say your tits around your waistline and all sorts of terrible things. Like, just, I remember one popped up on YouTube the other day. So now we've got the American one with with the 5 gay guys in it.
Oh yeah, Queer Eye for a Straight Guy.
Right, which is amazing. I cry at nearly every episode because it's coming at it from an empathetic
Yeah.
way. So these people have let themselves go in some way or another. So it's still that sort of person on the.
Yeah, it's not about the clothes. And again, it's one of the things I often say. It's not about the clothes. It's a bit like those programs about people who've got a lot of clutter in their house. It's just become too much, and it's become too overwhelming, and they need someone to come in. I don't know if you ever watched that Stacey Solomon program. That always has me like, to see how people have got themselves into that state, and to see totally clearly how it's impossible for them to unpick that on their own. And that's a little bit like, I think, what you and me do. It's sometimes people got to the state where they almost need to draw a line in the sand and have somebody else come into their closet. And actually, again, you'll have had this experience. I've been to people's houses to do wardrobe reviews where I'm practically, in the end, I'm sort of sitting on the bed and they're just putting stuff in a bin liner. They know what they need to get rid of.
Yeah.
But it's having permission, somebody else to say, yeah, let that go. Yeah, off you go. And obviously, even in Elevate, we do wardrobe calls in the same way, where people, it's just letting go of stuff is really cathartic.
But people feel guilty about getting rid of perfectly good clothes. They're like,
They
I
do.
paid money for that. I feel guilty. I don't want to get rid of it. So they just keep it in the wardrobe unworn, unloved, which is just simply clutter. You've got to let it go, and that is so cathartic. Like you say, it's like therapy. Draw a line in the sand, start again. That's why doing this podcast at this time of year is good, because everyone's in that kind of mindset.
Oh, it's the best
What
thing.
me in 2024? What do I
Yeah.
want to change? Do I want to do more? Do I want to do less? Do I want to make partner? Do I want to get a new role? Do I want to move cities? We all sort of get naturally in that state at the moment. And like you said as well before about clothes, it elevates you, it makes you feel different. And people, we communicate not just by speaking, not purely just by speaking. Visual is a huge part of it. So seeing a colleague, you'll be making up messages in your head about that colleague based on what they're wearing. I like to
Yeah.
think of it as like main character energy, right? So there's people talk about this now. So we're all the main character in our own lives. This is like our film of our lives. So when you're at work, you can be playing a character at work.
Mm,
That's you at work. So
mm,
you at work is different to you
mm,
at dinner party with your bestest, oldest friends.
mm.
It's kind of play the game. You
But
know,
but the interesting thing about that is, so I agree to a point, and then I really believe that it's they have to be congruent. So you have got different facets of your personality. And the example I would have is if somebody saw you in the street, like if you go to work in a certain way and someone saw you at the weekend and they literally walked straight past you because they didn't recognize you, something's amiss. Like we need to take ourselves to work. It's like what's your smartest version for work, or what's,
yeah,
do you know what I mean? It's almost like, and this is where sometimes people, and I'll use dressing for weddings as an example here, because often people for weddings suddenly go, oh, I need to wear a sort of floral dress or something. You see, and this is again back to my walking around John Lewis watching women shopping, just thinking, what are you picking up all these floral dresses for? It's like, I whenever I go to a wedding, pretty much I'll wear a jumpsuit because that's my style. And often again in Elevate, people have said weddings, and I've often suggested say a jumpsuit, and it's a bit like, oh, like it's like, yeah, who are you? You can be yourself as your smartest version. Like if I was to go and do a stage presentation, I'd probably wear a jumpsuit, but it would be a different sort of jumpsuit to the one I wear when I'm shopping with a client. And that's just an example of that. You don't have to suddenly wear what everyone else is wearing. If I worked in a corporate job, my look would be quite different. I wouldn't be a little dress wearer because it's just not my style.
yeah.
It's finding your version of smart. It's finding your version of a Christmas party. It's finding your version of a working from home. It's your style is very different to somebody else's, and really getting clear on that aesthetic. So I think the idea as well, what's fantastic about us talking today about, going into 2024, going into a new year, it's like, yeah, who do you want to be? And being conscious about it and making decisions, and also realizing that you will be bombarded in the spring of the new looks, the latest fads. It's like it's irrelevant. It's like, who do you want to be? And shopping consciously with that in mind about your ambitions and your goals for this year or the next year. Like you said, Lisa, if you want to make partner, what does that look like? Dress, the same old adage, dress for the job you want. But interestingly enough, I don't know if you've ever read that book, Lisa. It's called The Alter Ego Effect.
I haven't read it, no.
Um, I think it's Todd Herman, but he talks about different examples of people who take on a persona, and it's not pretending to be, it's not the act as if, it's tapping into a part of you. And he talks about, obviously, the one of the most famous ones is Beyonce becoming Sasha Fierce. Now I don't think she needs to be Sasha Fierce anymore, because she's not a teenage girl in a Christian household who in 1 minute is sort of sitting there being good girl, and the next minute is expected to be cavorting around on stage. She had to kind of become somebody else when she could be on stage. And she's talked about this a lot. If you see old interviews of her, she had to sort of become somebody else. It's still her, but it helps her perform differently. And I think clothes have got the power to help you do that. Like, who do you need to be to show up looking like a partner when you're not a partner, so people believe you? They
That
need
you
to
are.
see it to believe it. And
Yeah.
one of the things that he talks about in this book, which I do recommend, is having what he calls a totem, where you've got something that when you've got that on, and it could be, particularly for women, often it might be a handbag or a certain watch or glasses, where it's a bit like Clark Kent Superman. You put them on and you feel like you're that person. And a lot of women that I've done a training in Elevate where I've used this as an example, and said to people, like, what would that look like for you? And often it is the sort of handbag that's a bit more pricey, like buying a Mulberry bag or buying something that when they see that, it's like a signifier for them.
Yeah.
But glasses, it's an interesting, I can't remember now who it was, so I might get it wrong. I think it was Martin Luther King. His glasses didn't even have glass in them, but he felt that when he put his glasses on,
Wow.
he was more intelligent. So he always wore glasses, even though he didn't need them, because it made him feel like he was becoming a more intellectual person. So, you can think about how you can use clothes to become different.
Yeah, and the psychology behind it is fascinating. This is what I
Mm,
talk about loads on this podcast. There is psychology behind it.
mm,
One thing that some people don't do as well is they don't want to spend money on work clothes.
Mm.
They'd rather, so you've got your work
It's
life,
such a great investment.
and it's such a good investment.
It's like
Yeah.
the idea of spending, and this is, again, I feel this is such a common issue for women. It's that the messaging. I did a post this year actually on LinkedIn, and I wrote, I think it was in my newsletter, is your mum still dressing you? Because so many women that I work with, they've got this issue with what would their mother think if they knew that they'd spent that much, or that, again, it's even in Elevate recently, someone was asking in one of our style coaching calls, asking my opinion on this coat that she said, and I said, it's a great coat. It's like a really basic coat. And she's saying, oh, this is a bit boring. I was saying, no, but it's just, you kind of need that coat in your wardrobe. And I said, and then you get another one, maybe in a colour or something. And she was a bit like, what, another coat, like a second coat? And I said, tell me who's saying that to you. And she's like, yeah, it is my mum. And it's just fascinating when you
Interesting.
like, that's where it comes from, like from a generation. Again, with my parents were born like they were born in the sort of 30s. That kind of idea of like, you've got one thing and it's good enough and you'll make do.
Yeah.
It's just shaking off those stories about what's worth it. And also, again, around people who are successful at work or who've got a different life to what their parents had, the idea of having letting that go, because this is your life now, and you've got a great job, if you're working hard, to have clothes that are part of that job, it's an investment for your career to be dressing for work, and so to let go of that idea that spending money on clothes is frivolous, it's got to go. Like, it's such an investment.
Yeah,
If you
because
invest in your clothes, it can get you that pay rise. I've met people who've lost interviews on what they were wearing. Again, that first impression, you really need to give that impression. And this isn't about going and buying designer clothes. This is buying good quality items at a price point higher than you might think is right, and buying less. Because the other good thing about buying slightly more expensive clothes and you're comfortable is that you think twice before you make that purchase. If something's like, oh, it's fine, it's only 40 quid, you waste money. Whereas if you're like, oh God, those trousers, they're 150 pounds. Like, do I really want them? Am I really going to wear them? Let me just see how many outfits I can make. All of those steps to making a better purchase, absolutely worth it.
I mean, I'm the opposite. I spend probably too much on clothes, if I'm honest. I'm
actually coming out, so I've only got we're just in December now. I've got a couple more weeks. I've had a no buy this year.
Oh my goodness.
I've not bought any new clothes. However, again, I talked about this on my YouTube. My caveat this year, because I did one in 2020, and then obviously it was a bit of an odd year, so I didn't buy anything in 2020, but I didn't really need anything. And what I decided to do this year was to do a no buy, apart from I could buy things on Vinted. So I've bought things on Vinted, and I could only buy things using the profit of clothes that I'd sold. So I've sold things, and then I've had a budget, and then I've bought new things, which has totally scratched that itch. Like, it's really fun. I've bought some amazing things this year. I'm looking forward to getting to the end of it, but I don't think I'll change that habit. I don't need anything new, and you can get so many amazing things on Vinted. I think I'm going to do a YouTube video on my best buys this year that I've got. I've got some amazing things I don't think I've bought anything for more than about 40 quid. Most things are about a tenner.
Yeah, see, Vinted, everything's really low price on Vinted. I got my son actually a North Face coat on there, which is £300 in the shops. Got it for 129.
Exactly. And it also makes you realise the cost of of what your clothes are worth. Even, if you some people put things on there that they've bought and they're trying to get the same value back. No, they're not worth that. It's a bit like, when they say when you've bought a car, you lose half its value the minute you've driven it off the lot. It's a bit like that with clothes. It doesn't matter if you spent £100 on that. You're probably only going to get £20 for it.
Yeah,
if you want to sell it.
So what should people wear to work in 2024? Now, I know that's a really wide, vague question, but are there certain things that you'd recommend, or do it's going to be different for everyone though, isn't it? So
yeah, I think my message is always to dress for yourself, but to be really clear. So what's fantastic about the beginning of the year is to take time to take stock. Think about, like you said, think about your goals. I've got an exercise that I call What's Your Why, where you really think about what it would do for you to imagine yourself. If you were the person showing up as your best self, what could that do for you? And then what it looks like. So what it actually looks like physically in terms of your personal aesthetic, what it looks like if you're working your best? You know, are you up on stage presenting? Are you, you know, winning a pitch? Are you on a board? Are you leading a team? Whatever you're doing, are you on Zoom? Are you recording new videos for an online course you're creating if you're an online business owner? Whatever that looks like for you, it's being really clear on that and working backwards about shopping just for the lifestyle that you've actually got, the real life.
We're going to dig into this actually in the next episode, listeners. So do
Yeah.
tune in for that. We're actually going to go into some steps that you can take from Lizzie's book, Look Like the Leader You Are, and a reflection exercise that you can do to really get to a starting point with your wardrobe, a fresh slate, like a line in the sand for 2024, to really get your goals in place. And, you know, we'll give you a few actionable tips as well on how you can work out your aesthetic and,
Yeah.
you know, where a starting point really, because that is so valuable to take the time to do that. I just wanted to talk very quickly to finish off about Jenna Lyons, who did, she's on Real Housewives of New York, is it? So she used to be the creative director of J. Crew.
Yeah.
And there was a furore about, she wore jeans to, like, they do this finale of these Real Housewives shows in the studio, and everyone wears ludicrous big sequined dresses, like kind of really like glam, super glam, big hair. And I think they do it a lot more in America as well than they do here. We've got the Real Housewives of Cheshire in but everyone went mental about the fact that she wore jeans
Mm.
that show. Everyone was outraged and disgusted. What did you think about that?
Well, I just thought, again, what was really interesting when I saw that on Instagram, is, again, that's not her style. Now, I know I've seen pictures of her when she does go out, and sometimes, you know, there was one, well, I remember once seeing something on Instagram where she'd worn a latex outfit to some fancy dress thing or to some ball, and when she got home, she couldn't get out of it. So she does get dressed up. But again, in that moment, she wasn't like slouching in a pair of scruffy old jeans. She had jeans on and she had a top, like she'd consciously chosen jeans as an outfit. And this is the most important point when you're saying what to wear in 2024. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you're conscious of your choice. You've consciously put an outfit together with that item, and you're understanding the impression that you want to make. So like you said, Lisa, we're going to do another podcast episode where we give more details about that, because for me, knowing what your style words are, knowing what your personal branding words, so when you dress or when you shop or when you're getting ready for an event or packing for a conference or a trip, you're thinking, right, what do I want people to know about me? Now, in that moment, she must have been thinking, that's how she felt. Like, she would have consciously put an outfit together. She wouldn't have done it really thinking it through, because she's naturally an incredibly stylish woman. So she would have just naturally put something on. She felt comfortable. She looked put together. I think put together is kind of the key word. I don't know about you, Lisa, but that's one of the most used phrases when I get an inquiry on my website for my one-to-one work. I just want to look put together.
100%.
It's about items that fit together as an outfit, not as a random selection. Her outfit with jeans in it looked like she'd put together an outfit, which shows respect. She's looked like she respects herself. She respected the audience. If some people have got issues with jeans, again, that's their issue. I think there was a bit of a furore a couple of years ago with people on the red carpet when even women were wearing flats, you know, or where women were wearing like a tux rather than a dress. I think, you know, especially now more than ever with the gender fluidity and things like that, there's so much more, you know, you be you, you know, you do you. But the respectful part for yourself and for the audience is to it's not just thrown together. It's actually like, this is intentional. And even if, again, back to the idea of it shouldn't matter in the workplace, if somebody it's just their personal brand that they genuinely, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
You've already said the S word, so crack on.
You frozen there, Lisa. If on you know, people just basically don't give a shit, like if they really don't, then that's still a kind of conscious decision. They've gone, no, my personal brand is that I don't give a shit about what I'm wearing. I'm going to wear stuff that I've pulled off the floor, that's creased, dirty, doesn't look put together. If that's what the kind of rebellious point of that making a statement around the fact that my brand is that I don't care, it's still a conscious decision. It's when you look like you don't care, but you kind of do, you know, that's the issue. But for 2024, I think it's about conscious shopping. That is always going to be my message.
And if you get clear on what works for
Lisa,
you,
I can't hear you.
That. Oh, could you try again?
Oh, if you get, we've got a few technical problems, listeners, but if you get clear on what is for you and what is
You've come
right
back now,
for
yeah.
you, then you will shop in a more focused way and a more conscious way. So it's just do a bit of background work. That's the message. So thank you so much for coming on today, Lizzie. And I'm looking forward to doing phase 2 of this podcast, where we'll give some actual actionable tips to kick off 2024.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Lisa. It's been
Lovely
great.
to meet
Thanks.
you.